I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.
What up, perfect peeps? Welcome back to Code with Coding Cat. Today on the show, I have Eric with me. What's up, Eric?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing good.
Happy Wednesday, I guess. I've been like out of it. I don't know why, but 2024, I feel like I've been sicker than I have any other year, which has been awesome. So I'm just kind of rolling back in. So bear with me if my mental game is completely off.
Well, thanks for having me on. And I think you sound fine.
Oh, good. Whew. I'll throw up the old AWSAmplify Gen2 banner. So that's what we're talking about today. But I just wanted to say hi to Eric for a little bit first, get some people in here. I shared some links. I don't know, Eric, do you have any other spots to share this fun live coding session with?
No, so I didn't see which links you shared. Was it the docs links?
Sorry, I shared them out on my own Twitter and stuff like that. But let me send you the YouTube, and that way you have it as well.
Let me see. Oh, yep, I got it.
Okay,
cool.
Perfect. Sweet. Get some joiners in here, checking out Gen2. So what have you been up to? I think I saw you last at Vegas for reInvent. Have you been doing anything fun since then?
Yeah, no. It's reInvent was just a whirlwind event at the end of November, beginning of December. That was the first time I had been at a reInvent where I was speaking and I was an employee. I had been there as a customer before. So that was really fun meeting you, Alex, and meeting so many other great people in the AWS community, a bunch of other developer advocates and solution architects. And yeah, it was great. And what's really nice about my work schedule, so a little bit about me, I used to be doing a front-end engineering on the UI team, and then recently I moved over to doing developer advocacy for the AWSAmplify team. Is that usually December, like right after reInvent, things slow down a whole lot. It's really great. So I was able to deep dive into some old projects that I wanted to get done, create some content that I hadn't done in the past, deep dive even further into Gen2, which we're going to talk about today, and look at a demo app. So that was mostly all of December. And then my other passion, I have quite a few passions, live coding, teaching, but is football. And so I was all into the postseason. I'm a big 49ers fan. And then I had the heartbreak last Sunday when we were so close and we just came up short. But, me and my wife are big Taylor Swift fans. So I think during the game, every time Taylor Swift came on, we were cheering. But it was fun. For those who don't know, this is American football, not the football.
Yeah, and I'm sure worldwide you know who Taylor Swift is. If you don't know, Taylor Swift has been dating Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs, who beat the 49ers, unfortunately for Eric. I had the amazing trip to be a huge Detroit Lions fan, so you guys got to beat me slightly earlier. I was actually I was flying back from Singapore. I landed in San Francisco. I was going to think about going to the game. So I was going to hit up the Detroit San Francisco game, but I started doing math on like rebooking a flight, a hotel room, $1,500 for the ticket to actually go. And I'm like, I can't justify this. But it was fun. Like I got the trip back from, so I flew from San Francisco to Houston, and the flight back from Houston, there was a big group of us Lions fans. So we were all cheering together, and then we promptly lost Wi-Fi, so we couldn't watch the end of the game, which was the worst part.
Maybe that's a good thing.
So it was good.
That's so funny. I saw so many, like the day after that game, which I think 49ers I think more than half the nation wanted Lions to win. It's probably like 70-30. And so there's all these videos of like people watching them, like Lions fans watching the game, and they were so happy during the first half, and then the second half it didn't work out. And there was also a couple I saw where people were on an airplane, and just like you, but yeah, there was like cheering on the plane, and then the second half, yeah. I feel bad for the Lions fans because now that's how I feel now losing.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess what comes around goes around.
Yeah, yours was definitely a lot closer in the end there. It was a little more heartbreaking. I was cheering for the 49ers. I wanted to see was it Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy make his way onto the stage, but oh well, he's got a lot of years left. Hopefully he can.
Yeah, he's a young guy, so
Yeah,
it's
he'll
time.
figure it out. Somebody's got to beat Mahomes one of these days. From an AWS perspective, Gen 2 came out. I know you guys pinged me on it a while back when it was kind of in early alpha stage. So where are we at with Gen 2 these days? Is it officially released?
Yeah, so Gen 2 is still in preview right now. So we're hoping to release it soon, probably in the next quarter or two. And the way we Amplify Gen 2 is kind of a rethinking of the way we handle our creating apps using Amplify. So if you've used Amplify in the past, you've probably used either our command line interface or CLI tool, or you've probably used something called Studio. And I think me and a couple of people were on the podcast, Heather, a few months ago, maybe been a year ago right now, where we really we deep dive into Studio. We deep dive into our UI components framework, which we still have, by the way. We have all these products, and you can still use them today. We're still supported. But we've heard over and over again that people just really like these infrastructure as code tools. They like CDK. They like other cloud. Some people like CloudFormation. Some people don't. Like people like Terraform, SST. People like kind of deep diving into the code. And if you create the right abstracts for it, then it makes a really great experience. So we rethought of how can we take what we do best, and you can see here from the screenshot, and how can we create a really great user experience to create the backend, but also at the same time, we wanted to integrate it really well in with our AppSync service, our managed GraphQL service. So then we came up with this idea of this kind of dot notation, this TypeScript first approach, and this code first approach, which makes it much more straightforward to create these apps and then connect to databases, things like that.
I definitely love it from a standpoint. A lot of what, we're not all of it, but many of the tooling that we used in the past was always kind of more on the server, or not server generated code, just kind of being in the code itself and less on the UI side. I thought it was cool once we kind of got into the studio and things like that. But I still know massive projects that are running today, and it's all code based. So it was kind of cool to see this jump over to Gen 2 and where it's headed to. I really love it.
Yeah, and we looked at, and like I said, Studio's still going strong, and we're still adding to it. But if you look at some of the features people really liked about Studio, which is our kind of drag and drop interface, people really like the Figma plugin. Yeah. So that is now available as a command line tool that you can use to generate your forms, to grab Figma files and convert them over to React code. So a lot of those things are still there. They're just now, there's different ways to do it. You don't have to log into the Studio console to get there. Yeah, so that's right there, you're showing it's kind of one of our more popular ones. People really like the idea of creating a schema for your backend database, having in that case, there's an address price list, and then having that just converted over into a form. And so we brought all those over. There's now command line tools that you can do to generate those forms. And then it still uses the tried and true UI React library that we created. And we're still actually even adding in more components to that.
That's amazing that you guys are able to continue building this out too.
Yes. Looks like hi chat. Hi, Abjit. Hi, Best Jerry. Yeah, and if anybody has questions, yeah, feel free to.
Yeah, throw them in the
something.
chat. We'll get to them as we go.
Mhm.
So I think with all of that said, what we're here to talk about today is this fun part. This is probably the best page to start with. So it's these are the new docs, newish docs for Amplify AWS. And what we're looking to do is this piece right here for Gen 2. And we're gonna kind of deep dive. I hope we can work on the one I want to work on. We'll see if Eric agrees. But I'm looking forward to either like the Next.js app router server components or client components. If you're game for creating something.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'd love to.
Sweet.
I might have to. Let me share my screen, and we can get started. Let me open up my. We can just start exactly from scratch and then go from it, and
Perfect.
and we'll do it. Like
Do you want to just coach me through it like someone who doesn't know anything? You want to go that route? That's how we usually roll.
I was just gonna. Maybe I can show it.
Sure.
But
I'm totally game. I love a day off. That sounds great. Like I said, I haven't been feeling my best anyway. So, what up? What up? Focus Otter. Ooh, I like that name, Focus Otter.
That is our Michael Liendo. He is our AppSync expert,
nice.
DA, and always a pleasure to talk to him. It's good to have him in the chat.
It's always fun relating screen names back to users or to people. Messes me up all the time.
All right, let me see here. It's going to take me a second.
Yeah, well, Eric's clicking around over there just to show folks on the docs side of things. So you can still there are these kind of like newer docs, and you can flip between like frameworks and things too. So just keep that in mind. Like if you want to follow along, but you're like, I'm not ready for Gen 2, you can always pop into Next.js and just go version 6. You can do the whole like getting started and stuff like that. Typically what you're going to see after that, if I actually open up the console, not Firebase. Sorry, folks. Sorry. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. They're both console. So once you kind of get in here, you can start to create different apps too within this. So
yeah, it's pretty powerful there. And also, yeah, we redid our whole Gen 2 site. So we did a pretty much a fresh coat of paint on our whole doc site because we heard it was time for it. So we're really glad. I think it looks much more nicer, cleaner, easier to navigate. We did a whole infrastructure cleanup on it.
Couldn't agree more. It's great now. I know you're gonna hate this, but you're probably gonna have to bump up font at least 1, maybe 2. It gets a little tight. Okay. Yes, that's good.
All right.
I think. Let us know if you can't see anything, folks.
Yeah. So here's my sample folder. I have just a bunch of sample apps in here, but let's just start from scratch. Let's create a next app. So I'm going to do npx create next app at latest, and then we'll call it code cat live. We're going to use TypeScript, ESLint. I love Tailwind, so we'll leave that on. So last time I was here, we showed everything using our UI components library, our UI React library. I think today we'll just use Tailwind just to kind of speed things up a little bit, but certainly you can do we have a lot of really nice UI components in as well. And we'll also use Authenticator.
This is a interesting question. I think it's okay to answer. Trying to build a surveillance app for something like a whistleblower within my state. Is that something I can do with Gen 2?
You can do, well, one nice thing I'll show in a second is that you can do all sorts of, if you need to get to drop down from our Gen 2, you can drop down to the CDK layer, and you can create all the services that you need. So if you have some particular use case, I'm not sure what you would need for surveillance, you can then maybe use some AWS services for that. So I would say that could happen. Things like protecting your app with auth and everything are already there.
Yeah, I'll put a link in. I just did a little update. So we have this new thing called community.aws out there. So that's part of, I think, community builders and other folks can write content on there. I'll drop the link in, but I just did a CW or a CWK CDK comparison. There we go, to Amplify and kind of when to use which and both and all those fun things. So definitely jump in and check that out too.
Nice. That's awesome.
Ooh,
All right.
I
So
like
I'm going to install a couple of libraries, our UI React library and AWSAmplify library. And there's one more. Let me check. While that's installing.
Yeah, that's a great point, Focus Otter. When the original Amplify came out, there's kind of like this black magic that was occurring, and no one actually understood what was going on. And then it kind of opened up further, and you were able to extend a lot of things. So, great point. If AWS can do it, pretty much Amplify can do it. So,
I'm also going to install one more. I'm going to install adapter Next.js. And this is a specific adapter we created exactly for a Next.js if we're using server components and server rendering. So let's just, we'll start the server. And before we get too far, I don't know, actually, before we do that, let me reopen this in the same folder.
-R, we were just talking about this. I can never remember the dash, which one's opens in the same.
Man, I forget too sometimes, so it's glad.
Brittany's always like, you need -R. I'm like, oh, sorry.
And we'll just close some of these things. Okay. All right, so now we're in our app and we can search files. Let's go. So here's our main like hello world app that comes out of the box with Next. So I don't know about you. I always like just deleting all this. And then we'll just do hello world. And then I'll just delete some CSS as well. I think that's the only one I want. Okay. And now we'll just npm run devit. And then let's see, I'll bring it over to the other side. You still see everything?
Yep, sure do.
It's compiling. It's all like, you're using Tailwind, but you don't have any Tailwind utility classes. What are you doing? That's what it just told us. All right. So here is very ugly, but very simple hello world. And we'll bump that font up in a second. But let's say we want to do flex column items center. And then for this H1, we'll do class name text. I don't know, 3XL. Also add padding 4. Okay, so we got a hello world here. So I think what we should do before we jump directly into setting up Gen2, I figure we want to protect this whole app by our authenticator. Well, you know what? I'll do two things. First, let's get since it takes a few minutes to provision and create all the resources, let's do that first. And then we'll jump into adding the authenticator. How does that sound?
Sorry, that sounds great. I'm kind of thinking, should we tell people that haven't used Amplify at all, maybe what's about to occur, or maybe while it's occurring?
Yeah. Sure. 1 second here. So what I'm thinking is, so we have this Next app. It's just a basic Hello World Next app using Tailwind. And the next steps here would be to connect it to a backend. So what I'm thinking is, let's say we create a kind of like a meal planning prep app. So we're going to try to see how far we can get on that. So we're going to have like, I'm thinking like 3 boxes here on the screen. One will say breakfast, one will have lunch, one will have dinner, and then you should be able to put in a list of food that you like and calories, and it'll be tied into the date for that. And then you can save it, and then you can also delete it. So
Cool.
I think
You're making me hungry, by the way, but
yeah,
it sounds great.
So maybe it's a maybe it's like a way to save some data to the back end, kind of like a CRUD type app, but I think it'll just show how straightforward it is to get started with Gen2. And then on top of that, we want to make sure that only logged in, authenticated users are able to connect and make these changes and add these values for their own user. So that's kind of the goal of today.
Nice, love it.
All right, so we're open up another terminal, and what we can do is, it's in the docs here, so we can mirror what it says in the docs. But if you go to docs.amplify.aws and you click on the Get Started, and you get started here, you can do this one right here. You're kind of saying you want to take a look at this Next.js app server components, and it gives you the instructions. So the first thing it tells us right here is to, after you create the app, is to run this npm create amplify at latest. Also, by the way, I think I'm using Node 20. So make sure, well, it looks like I'm using 18.17. I think that's fine. But you need to have like at least 18 or 20 to do this. Otherwise, you might get an error. So I'm going to just copy and paste this here. And I just paste this in the main, and it's going to ask me a few questions. I'm going to create a project on the root. And this is just going to scaffold some things out. So if we look at here, we have our public, our source folder, and it's going to create a new Amplify folder when it's done here. So it's just going to install some required dependencies. While this is going, do we have any other questions?
I think we just got the -r thing, which we covered. So -r opens VS Code in the same window, so you don't have to like open a whole nother one. I didn't actually see you use any Vim things, but there's something about Vim key bindings. So
oh yeah, I love Vim. I'm a big Vim fan, so I use it.
My lead Dan Moore at FusionAuth, huge Vim guy, like to the point where I'm like, it's easier, and he's like, no, it's not. It's like, okay. I feel like I have to open VS Code for everything.
All right, so it looks like it created it.
So I believe, and you can correct me on this, at this point, you actually created a project up in the cloud on AWS as well, right?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
We're not quite there yet.
Cool.
So we have this new Amplify folder here. And inside here, we have this auth and data. And so let's take a look at them. So if we look at auth here, so it's scaffolded all this out. And what this is saying is, this is a kind of out-of-the-box Cognito, which is our identity provider for AWS service. And you can make some changes to it, but I'm probably going to leave it as default. It says users are going to log in through email. If I want to, I can add in like federated logins, like login with Amazon or Google, if I needed to. I can also add in multi-factor authentication. I can add user attributes. So this is going to scaffold out and create a brand new Cognito backend for us with some very sane defaults that we can use.
This is reminding me, I have an email out to Renee. I haven't heard back. So if you see him poking around, send him over my way, because we're supposed to chat about Auth0, FusionAuth kind of stuff.
Oh, nice. Yes. And we are working with Auth0. You can add external providers. Like, for example, a use case, and Michael Lindo probably knows something about this. Like, you can use GraphQL, our managed app sync service, but then have an external authorization provider through Okta or Auth0.
Yep.
So you can do things like that. So we do work with those other providers. I'm just going to leave it all default for now. And then in the resource, this is the resource one. And this is where we create our schema. And we give a bunch of steps too for people who've never used it before, or you can look through the documentation. So you can think of this as creating this like a database, but really we're creating a AppSync or GraphQL service. And when we use this dot model, it is creating not just this model, but it's creating all the resolvers. So usually in GraphQL, you have to create these resolvers that connect to your database, to like the queries you're putting in. And this does everything for you. So with these few lines, it creates the create, read, update, and delete. In this case, like list, get, all those ones create, delete for you, and just with a few lines of code. So, and it also has this dot notation, so you can add in validation rules. So maybe this content has to be a string, and if you try to push up a number into this content, it's not going to work. You can also make it required. So when you're doing a create, you have to have this available. And we have all these other types too, like enums, dates, things like that. And I'll show you.
Is there a choice to go API gateway anymore, or is it kind of fallen to the wayside?
So if you want the API gateway now, then which to your point, like a RESTful service, you can drop down to the CDK layer and then create that manually. So you can still create a REST service if you want. You can also drop down to create functions. So we're in developer preview right now. We really focused on 2 use cases. That is authentication and data.
Okay.
However, we're adding in like storage and functions, which are going to be like these other high level kind of constructs. You can add them now with CDK, but it's a little bit more work.
Makes sense. Cool.
And then we're also looking at adding in like that RESTful API if you didn't want to use GraphQL.
Nice.
And so this also has these authorization rules too. So like in this case, this says only the owner of it, whoever creates it, can update, create, read, and update and delete, but public users can read. And then we can also set authorization modes, like we can default it to API key if we wanted to. And then in this one file, the backend file, this is where we define the backend. So we take those 2 files, we put it in here, and this is also where you can do additional things to get down to the CDK layer. But we probably won't do that in this video today. All right, so I think what the next step is, let's create a schema for our new meal prep app. And I think we need a few things here. So first, I'm not going to call it to do, but I'm going to call it meal. And then first name, I'm going to have a meal name. And then I'm going to use this A, and this is, by the way, imported in from this AWSAmplify backend. And if you've used Zod, have you used Zod, Alex?
Yep.
Yeah. So this might seem kind of familiar with you, sounds a little bit familiar, but if you hit dot, I have all these different types I can use. And I'm going to use enum for this one. And then I'm going to add in a few in here. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and let's say a snack. So we'll assume that every one you have to choose what it is. We'll add in a food, which is just going to be a string, or make it required. And actually, I think I'm going to make this required too. Actually, with an enum, I'm just going to leave it like this. But this string is going to be required. It's going to call food. I'm going to have something called calories. We want to kind of every single meal, we want to track how many calories it is. And you see Amazon Q trying to give me some suggestions here, which I don't need. And then I'll have a date. So 8 date, and then we'll make that required as well. And for authorization, I'm just going to leave it the owner and read. I'm going to change this API key. Nice thing too, this is all has IntelliSense behind it. So I can just say, oh, here are the options I can choose. I'm going to make sure it's user pool. Expires in 30 days. That's fine. I think that's it. So I'm just going to keep this change. Now I have this new model, and it also has this. We just saw this data for this, or not this resource. It's the auth. So we also have this auth here, which I'm just going to leave default. And now I want to deploy it. Now, if you don't have an AWS account, there is instructions in this Amplify documentation, which it says right here, configure your AWS account to use Amplify. So if you use the AWS CLI or you've done this in the past, you may not need to use this part, but this kind of tells you what you need to do. You have to run this configure command. I've already done that, and so I should be able to just do it. Now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for 1 sec because I need to run a command kind of locally for my environment. So give me 1 sec. I'm basically telling since we have a lot of AWS accounts, I have to do these commands to say, hey, use this one.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Okay, let me share my screen again. Present. Keep hitting slides. That's not it. Entire screen.
Show some slides. That'd be all right. Cool.
All right, so I'm back here. So I'm going to run this command, npx amplify sandbox. And what this does is it will start provisioning and creating the app. What it does in the background, it uses CloudFormation scripts, and it creates the CloudFormation scripts. And it's also an ephemeral environment. So what I mean by that is this is really meant to only be used for testing locally. And it's you can do this for any project that you want. And it takes probably a few minutes to get it all up and running, but it will go ahead to my AWS account and provision everything in the back end for it. Hopefully, if we don't see any errors. A lot of people say this red text and they get worried. Don't worry, that's normal. It's just saying that we're creating this for the first time. All right, so it's now on its merry way. It's going to start provisioning the backend, and what'll happen is it'll create this new. It's going to create this new Amplify configuration file, which if you've used Amplify in the past, it used to be called AWS exports. Now it's called Amplify configuration JSON. And we'll be able to import that in, and that'll have all the settings and URLs and everything that we need, all the keys to be able to talk to the back end. So since this is going to take a few minutes, I figure we should start building the front end a little bit.
Will we get to the point where we talk about kind of the drift and things like that? Because that's one of the features I love now. If that makes sense.
No, what do you mean by drift?
So in the past, and maybe this is just my experience, when we push up a sandbox like that, other developers could also work off our same code base. So they would bring this in and they would have an Amplify environment within it. But in order to make database changes, you would have to repush and make sure CloudFormation does its thing, and the database gets set and AppSync gets set, and all those things finish, and they're all nice and happy together. With Gen 2, from what I've noticed so far, is it actually lets you just update the modeling side of it, and it doesn't require some other pieces. So those are not directly in sync, and later on you can make them kind of come back in sync so that they're guaranteed. Is that, maybe I'm far off on this, but
well, we have hot swapping, so you can make individual changes to, let's say, the schema that we just looked at, and then it will automatically detect those changes because the sandbox is running in the background at all times looking for file changes, and it'll only make certain changes. So once you get the sandbox up and running, it's much quicker to make changes. You have ephemeral environments usually for each individual developer on your team, but though you can share sandboxes. So I've seen that. I haven't seen what you're talking about with drift though, but I'll look into that. There's so many new things.
It might be the hot swap I'm thinking of. I just know in the past it was always very slow to make model changes, and it seems much faster now.
Yes, yeah, we have made some updates so it can do that kind of fancy CDK hot swap stuff that makes it easier.
Nice.
Nice. Okay, well, let's continue on. So we have kind of an ugly app, but what I want to do is I want to surround it all by Cognito, or authentication provider. And since we're using Next 14, we have to, and this is kind of a new paradigm with Next. If you've used the old 13 with Pages router, server router is a little different. We need to kind of make sure that we're dealing with server components and kind of client components a little bit differently. So what I like to do is I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it components, and I'm going to create a new one. We're going to call it auth.tsx. So I'm going to do some live coding here. So we're going to export default function auth, and it's going to provide children, and then children type React node. Nope. And then we're going to import a few things in. First, this is going to be a client component, use client. And then we're going to import in the authenticator. And then we have to import these in for the styles. And we haven't quite yet. We're importing an Amplify here, but we don't have the Amplify configuration file, but we'll imagine that we'll have it. So it'll be import config from, I think it'll be // amplify configuration.json. And then we have to run and amplify.configure. There it is. And then we also, since we're using server components, we need to do this SSR true. And what this does is it makes so that we also we're saving the authentication and JOP tokens inside our cookies. And that way the backend can retrieve those if it needs to do some authentication checkups.
So even though this is, because we used use client, this is client-side component, we're actually using SSR as well for the cookie side?
Yes, yeah. So when you configure the authenticator, which is kind of for those who don't know, it's a drop-in login system that you can add to your apps with a few lines of boilerplate. We have to do it on the client side. It doesn't work on the server side yet. And by the way, looks like our ephemeral environment's up and running. And if we look back here, now we do have the Amplify configuration file. So now I don't have any errors. And I could do this. I'll return the authenticator. If I spelt that wrong, oops, authenticator. Yep, there it is. And then inside here, we're going to put in our children. And then we'll surround this whole thing. Okay, that looks right. And now I'm going to put in my layout. Or import in that. It's the default export from @/components/auth. And now, where it says children here, I'm going to surround the whole app by it. So this is a different way to do it. If you've used the old authenticator, you may have used something called with authenticator. This is the way you do it with here. All right.
Cool.
So I still have my app running, I believe. So now we should be able to log in. So let's just see if we can do that. Back to my app here. Refresh it. Might have to stop and restart the server. We'll see. My computer's a little slow too, I think, because I'm live streaming. But here it is.
Ooh.
Woohoo. All right. And we have our create account And I'll just create an account with an old email address I have. Let's see here. Put some fake password in there. And now I have a confirmation code. And look on my phone for it.
I think I'm going to send everything to Icy Storm's test.
Please don't. No.
And then I'll IM you. Please send me code.
Okay, cool. So
Nice.
I'm logged in here. We can add in log out buttons and things like that, but for now we're logged in. And if we can kind of prove that too, if we look inside our inspect and then go into our application, this is really small. Probably can't see it. I'll make it. So now we have all these tokens down here that's being saved. That's
So
cookies.
just a word from someone that's done this. If you wrap your full app in auth, you could run into issues where you're getting data from like the server. So that's where the server side pieces come from. So if you're like, let's say putting a blog out and you need an OG image or something like that, make sure that's not inside of your auth pieces because that won't appear right away. And so it'll blow things up. Just keep that in mind as we're going through this example.
No, that's a good point. Yep. Okay, so we've at least proved now that we are able to log in and we're connecting to this ephemeral environment. But let's say we want to use this resource we created for data to start entering information in. How are we on time, by the way?
We're good. I think we have about 45 minutes left.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I can do some more coding here. So I think what I'm going to do in this components folder is I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it meal.tsx. And this file will be our meal file. And this one will be use client. And we'll export default function meal. And I think I'll have some props passed in. But before we do that, I suppose we'll just leave it empty. And let's just create kind of the scaffolding here. I'm probably, just to save some time, I might copy and paste some stuff from my other screen.
Sure.
Because I have a feeling it's going to take a while to type everything. Let's see.
Code
here.
Whisper is in full effect. I like it.
Yeah. Yep. We'll have a section here. Class name, width 1/4. And then we'll have a form. And we'll use server actions in a second. But I'll just delete this for now. Try to delete it. There we go. And for this form, I'll have a class name. Flex column border to P5 rounded gap 4. And then we'll have an input type equals text. We'll call it meal name. And we'll make it read only. So what I want to try to do is, well, we don't have read only. I'm just having this type here. It's actually going to be hidden. I'm going to try to reuse this between lunch, breakfast, and dinner.
Okay.
So I think what I'm going to have is a value here. And we're going to import in from here something called, we'll use meal name. And that will be, a meal name will be type string. Okay, and then I can do meal name to uppercase. All right, so that's just a hidden input that we're going to use later when we use our server actions. But I think what we really want is a couple labels for where to enter your food in, and then also where to enter the calories in. So this is where I'm going to do a little copy and paste action.
You're probably going to answer this question, but is there
Yeah.
any way of reading in your schema so that you can use like TypeScript and pull that enum in off of them?
Oh, that's a good point. Probably there is inside the schema itself, in this resource file, resource file right here. I think what I probably want to do if I had more time is maybe refactor this into like its own constant, and then have that in here, and then export the constant out. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking like this, you could export the schema as a whole and possibly like go schema dot meal dot whatever and like actually pull those out. But I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah. Well, later on, we're going to be doing that in a similar way.
Cool.
To something similar. I'll show you. All right. So we have now this label for our meal name. We're going to enter meal name info. We have this input here. And then we need a button. And I'm going to just say delete some of these since we're not quite there. So we have this class name, this button. And I think let's just add this in and see what it looks like. So we're going to go back to our page TSX file. And in here, we'll probably want to do a few more changes. Once again, I'm just going to copy and paste a few things from my other screen, so you don't have to see me typing. So I'm going to have my super amazing fitness, I guess be a meal plan app, maybe. Better description, meal plan app. I'm going to have the date at the top. And now I should be able to import in those meals. So it's not going to find it. There it is. I found it. And we need to pass in the meal name. So meal name. First one we'll call breakfast. We can probably auto close this. We don't need to. Okay. And then the other one would be lunch. And we won't worry about snacks right now, but we can have that. All right. Come back to here. Refresh it. So let's see if we have a little bit of HTML, CSS. Okay. We have it here. It looks a little weird. Wonder, I do have it zoomed in, but maybe we can add a few more things in here. So
maybe like a gap 2 up there would be good.
Yeah, let's do a gap 6 right here. Width full. Let's see what it looks like if we do width full here. And okay, I got the gap going. Wonder what the width is set on this. We'll do a little live troubleshooting. So we have the gap. That's full. H1, H2, section. Oh, because this is width 1/4. I wonder if I do width 100%. Okay, so I could change it here. Let's go back to the code. And let's do 1/2. There we go. I think that looks a little nicer.
That's cool.
Okay, so we have breakfast, estimated calories. Yeah, breakfast, estimated calories, lunch, estimated dinners. Okay, so the idea now is that we want to be able to enter your breakfast, like I had pizza, toast, and whatever, and then 300, and then we want to kind of send it to our backend and then lock this up so that way users can't do anything to make changes, or they can delete it and then re-enter it in, and it's being saved in the backend. So I think what we want to do is we need to start thinking about like creating and deleting on it. And then I think what we'll have is, since we're using forms here in our meal TSX, we'll add a server action, but we'll pass the server action from the parent to the child component. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yep. And by the way, we're not using Next. So in this case, you can put this in a separate file, but I'm just going to leave it on this one. So we'll do an on submit. And remember, server actions and Next always have async in front of them. So, and they have this form data. And then, one thing I forgot is we need some way to talk. Since we're on the server here, we have our new JavaScript v6 library that can do client side and server side, but we need to kind of set up the server side to do it. So the way I like to do that is I create a new file, a utils folder. So a new file in a utils folder. So in my app, I have components, actually in the source, I should say. I'll create a new folder here. We'll call it utils. And then new inside utils, I'll have amplify utils.ts. And the purpose of this is to be able to work with our server components and be able to talk back to the server. And we have to do a little setup. This is actually all in the documentation too. So this is nothing crazy. So we're going to export const cookie based client. And then we're going to use something called generate server client using cookies. And you mentioned before about using the schema. We're going to have the schema right here. And the schema is going to be imported directly in, find it, from our resource file. So from that resource file before. So this is how we can get this kind of end-to-end type safety, because now we're using the schema that we generated, and this is going to be used with our server components. You can also use this with client components as well. And then cool. we need three things here. First, we need a config, which I'm gonna have to import in. This is that the Amplify configuration file. Let's see here. I guess put from. Is it going to load it? Yeah, here it is. Amplify configuration. Then we need cookies, and this is directly from Next. And by the way, you can do this with Nuxt too if you're a Nuxt fan. From Next headers.
Oh, it's SvelteKit.
Yeah, we're looking at SvelteKit right now, but nice. I don't think we have official documentation on that.
Should go down the whole list. Just keep
So cookies, and then auth mode, and then we'll have a user pool. So now we have a way to run on the server using this cookie-based client. It has the schema, so it knows what it should run. And so if we want to talk to our GraphQL, our managed GraphQL service, we can now use this new cookies-based client to do it. And it's going to know, because it's going to look through the cookies to see if someone's logged in or not. So I think the next thing to do then is to go back to the page TSX file and use it. So we have this on submit here. We're going to do const, just have an open bracket here. And now we're going to use await our cookie-based client. Yep, there it is. And you can see here, which is nice, we have this auto completion. So we know we have meal here. And then we can do all those create, read, update, and delete functions. So we can do create, delete, get, list, update. It's all here for us. And since we're doing we want to create something, we'll do create. And now it's going to tell us what we need. We have to add in the calories, the data, the food, the ID, meal name, and owner. I guess these aren't required. We could make them required, but they're not. So I suppose we can start with calories. And then this is supposed to be a number. So if you're familiar with Oh, looks like it actually detects some of them. So
Nice.
this is saying form data.get is the way inside Next when you're using server actions that you can grab the data. This is basically the same thing if like you do a normal submit, like an on submit, and then you have to get the form element out of it. You can do something similar by grabbing the form data.
Yeah, that's part of that new web API. I think a couple years ago, old now, something like that.
Yep. And then we have, didn't quite get all this right. So let's do this. We got food. This is going to be the form data.get. And we're going to call this meal info. If you don't know, well, I'll come back to it. So, but this .get, these are basically the names that you have on the inputs. ToString as string. And then we have the date, which we kind of could whisper, kind of got a little bit of it here, but we're going to do to string. And this date actually doesn't, it only takes it in the year, month, date format. If you kind of look at it here, or if you go back to the resource file, it tells you it doesn't accept the time. So you have to remove that from it. It's a little bit of a hack here, but it works. And then the last one is the meal name. I'm just going to copy and paste this from my other screen because it's a lot to type. So this right here, you're probably thinking like, this is already inside this resource data file. So this is where I'm thinking you can't, when I was doing this demo earlier, I couldn't grab it directly from the schema file because I do have the schema, which was exported out.
Right.
And you can like grab like meal data from it, but I couldn't quite grab this enum out of here. So I'm just typing it in.
Okay.
Like this for now. Okay. So if I did that right, so now I have this new on submit, and this will return back a data, errors, and extension. So if there's any errors, it'll return errors, but I'm just going to console log the data. So now we have our on submit. What we need to do though is we need to pass it on to this meal. So I'm just going to create something called on submit equals on submit. But we don't have an on submit in here. So go back to meals. And right now we only have a meal name. So we'll add in on submit. Probably could think of a better name. We have to type it, which is on submit, which is going to take a form data of type form data. And then it's going to return void. Void. All right, I don't see any errors. And now I can add an action on here. So if you're normally in React, you would do on submit, but with Next 14, we can just do action equals. And then we just pass in the on submit.
That's so weird.
Have you used server actions before?
I have. I don't think I've used it where you pass the function through to the component like this. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah. Let's see here. Oh, one thing I missed. If we go back to page.
I think mainly I was using it for like log in, log out type stuff. I don't know if I used it in any form. So, well, no, I must have because email password would have come through. Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like this. So we can have client components talk directly over to our server components. But one thing you have to do, a lot of times people refactor this into their own actions file. But yeah, you can just put it in here. You just have to put use server at the top though.
Okay.
Otherwise, it like complains.
I think I was doing an actions file as well. It's been a minute since it first came out, I think.
Yeah, and it was in beta for a while in Next 13.
All yeah, I should clarify. I haven't used it in 14, only 13. So.
Okay. And while it's kind of thinking there, another thing I want to do is as soon as it loads, I want to, since this is on the server, I don't need to like run a function or anything. I could just have it do something as soon as the app loads. So I'm going to have it. First, I need to go up here and make sure this is async. Which this is a dead giveaway. This is a server component. If you have async as the component name. So I'm going to create a response here. I'm going to do await. I'm going to use that cookie-based client again. Client dot models dot meal dot. This time I'm going to do a list. And what I want to try to do is make sure I only get values from today. So I'm going to filter on data. Excuse me, date, not data, date. And now I can do make sure it equals, and it already set it for me. So this is saying make sure that the date equals today's date. And then I guess I could just call this current meal. I could do this a couple ways. I'm gonna call this current meal. Actually, let's do this. I'll leave this response.
Is there any like advantage, disadvantage for storing dates? Like, I think this is going to end up as a string type. I think.
Yes, you're right.
Instead of doing that, like just saving the normal, like numeric version of that date represented from like calendar days.
Like saving it as
like just doing
epic
new
or...
date. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I kind of, the date object requires this very specific format.
Okay.
So it has to be this year, month, day format.
Okay.
To
So
save and everything.
Gotcha. All right.
So that's kind of why I was doing it that way. So I can do here, have this equal date. You know what? It's actually easier. You're probably thinking the same thing I am. If you go data, I can rename it to current meal. As a little ES6 trick. Now in current meal, I can now, I can maybe just console log it out for now, but we can use that in our app to check to see if there actually is data in there. All right, so if we, okay, so we're back up and running again. And I'm gonna open up here. So current meal says it's empty. There's no current meals right now on the server. Well, let's see if we can add one. So we'll add breakfast. Okay, so let's say I eat toast and peaches and grapefruit. Grapefruit. And let's say that's 400 calories. I hit submit. Okay, cool. So now you see my data changed. I have now in my database, I have my data and I have my current meal. So I know it's saving right now. I didn't see any errors. Looks like it's working. But the next step would be we want to kind of, maybe after you enter this in and you click submit, I want to disable this whole screen here and then have a button to delete this in case I accidentally messed up. Like oops, I would actually need to add something else. So that's the next step.
Nice.
All right. So if I go back to my meal TSX file, first, I think since we know this current meal has the data that we want, let's pass in a couple things. So we have this on submit, which we already did, but let's pass in current meal, and we're going to use a schema, and it's going to be meal. So this is imported directly in from the, oops, that's not how you do this. This is right down here. TypeScript faux pas. This should be current meal. And then this needs to be imported in. And make sure, some people accidentally import it from data store. Don't do that. That's the wrong one. Always import it in from that new Amplify folder that was created in the resource. All right, so now we have this new current meal, and now we can do all sorts of things because current meal, once it does that filter and everything, if there's no meal for that day, it'll be undefined. So we can check right away and do some things. So right underneath here, I'm going to do a current meal. So I'm going to check to see if it's not undefined, I'm going to put some information in here. And I'm just going to copy and paste it. And by the way, if it is undefined, it should just return null. Okay. And we're going to add a delete button. We haven't done add delete yet, but we're going to add it here soon. But we'll just have a delete button. But most important thing is that we'll have something that says submitted at the top. And it should be submitted. So if I come back here and refresh it, okay, we'll check that in a second. I don't see anything, but I think the current meal, oh, I probably had to pass it in. That's probably why. Yeah, I've got a big error right here. So now I have to pass in current meal equals current meal. Okay. Oh, and it's also giving me another error here. Let's see, what does it say?
Did we not extend out meal?
Oh, you know what? We have to get the correct current meal, because this current meal is for everything that has this date, but we're going to have one for breakfast and a few others. So we'll need to do this. We'll do a find meal dot meal name equals breakfast. And so we'll have to do something similar for all of them. And then, oh, and then it could be undefined. So we have to do something like this. There it is.
I never think about the exclamation like that. That's good.
Yeah, this is just a quick trick, because this could be undefined, and then that's an issue.
Yeah, I never would have thought about that. Hacking the TypeScript.
Yeah. So people who are TypeScript experts that are watching this now live or on replay are probably cringing.
Yeah. Put in the comments what it really should be, and pretend we did that.
And so we have, this one should be lunch. This one should be dinner. And, oh, I accidentally did the on submit. So on submit. All right, so everything's happy in the TypeScript world. It should find the correct one. Okay, so now I have this button, but I also kind of want to gray these things out and make them disabled so someone can't hit it again. So I go back to meal, and also want to add a delete info. So I'm going to go back to my meal, and I think what we want to do is just add a disabled button. So this would be this one. I think we can add it into this input here.
I think we might have just broken down our TypeScript issue here, right? Because technically we'll never get a empty current meal.
Well, we definitely will.
Within the meal itself, we might want to allow undefined. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we're definitely, maybe the types need to be changed a little bit for that undefined case, because we're right here. It only accepts meal, but maybe we should do and or undefined, because it is sometimes undefined.
Yeah.
Let's see what it looks like here. If I refresh it. Oops. Okay, so now it's all kind of grayed out. You can see you can't hit the submit button again.
Yep. So it's doing what you want. That's good.
Yeah.
And the other two are still open, correct? Like breakfast or lunch and dinner.
Yeah, let's see. Let's add some lunch. We'll have pizza, 200. We'll submit it. Yep, now it added it in there. We can do dinner. We had pork chops, 800 calories. It takes a second. We can add a loading spinner too if we want. Okay, so now they're all set. So now let's say we want to, there's two things. One is we want it to delete it and then clear this data from here. So first, maybe let's just try to see if we can delete it and it's not clearing the text first. So I need to go back into my pages file, and then I have my onSubmit, but now I need to create a delete. And this is also going to be a server action that should work for us. And do const on delete, like async. And this time you don't have to do a form data. It doesn't have to be connected to a form. It could just be a function that you just call, which is really neat. But you just have to make sure you put in use server and make it async. And now I can say, let's grab the data out of here and await that cookie-based client models dot meal, capital M. And now we can do delete. And all this needs is an ID. And we're passing that ID directly from here. And then I'll console log data. I just always like to see it working. If this was production, you'd probably want to like check for errors and do something if error happened. But this is demo, and we'll do validate path. And that'll like just refresh this path, this root path here. We'll go back to meal. And let's see here. We'll add in on delete. And this will be on delete. Instead of having this, will be ID string. And it's complaining, I think, because there it is. I didn't have the type. And then we'll, this button right here, it's type button. So even though it's in this form, since I did a type button, it won't do a submission on the form. We can do on click, and then we'll pass in this current meal.id. So that should delete it if I did this right. Okay. Oh, it's complaining, cannot find. Oh, that's a weird error. I think it's just kind of slow. Let's see if I get an error here.
Is there something on the end of that class name, like not double coded? Maybe.
Oh, that's a good point.
Oh, there it goes. I think it just resolved.
Yeah. Sometimes I have to, I don't know if anybody's done this in when you're in VS Code. Sometimes I just have to like reload the window, reload TypeScript. Things just kind of work weird. All right. So all these are here. So if I just do delete entry, I get an error. On delete is, oh, you know what? Because I didn't pass it in. So I come back here. Now these are all complaining. So on delete equals on delete. Pass it in. Pass it in. Those are all happy now. Refresh. You still see these are all grayed out. And click delete entry. All right, so now it's back, but it does have, still has the text here. No, it doesn't. I thought it did for a second.
I don't know that our other two that have this submitted, I don't think they have our text.
Oh, you're right. So it never saves the text. So that's the next thing we need to do to make sure it saves the text. So we can delete the entry. I believe this one not deleted. Let's see if we can get the text showing up here. So we are passing this whole meal, current meal, which should have the name in it.
So we have to just set some form values in there?
Exactly. You are 100% correct. So we have these inputs, like we have this text area. And what I want to do is have a use state for both calories and food. Since this is a client component, we can use use states. This is a way we can keep track of our app. So we're going to have these two, calories, set calories. And I'm going to import this from React. And what this is saying is that as soon as this component loads, it's going to look at the calories, the current meal.calories, and it's going to set to 0 if it's undefined. And we're going to have the food set to empty if it's undefined. But otherwise, we're setting the food and calories here.
I'm not a React expert, but is there any advantage of just passing the full object in instead of like the individual value?
What do you mean?
So I think your current meal has the entire data that you're looking for. So instead of just having that, like why do we use the state here?
Well, yeah, that's because what I'm thinking of is when we hit this delete button, we want to set the forms to empty.
Okay.
So we want to show, and to do that, you have to kind of use state because it's going to update the forms and change the input. So we're going to add a value and an on change to it.
Gotcha.
So I'll show you what I mean by that. So in this text area here, at the bottom, I'm going to create an on change. And this is going to be this. So what this says is soon as anytime you press something on the keyboard, it's going to set the food to this. But in the same one, we want it to default to food. I like Vue better in this respect because you can use something called vModel.
Yeah.
But inside React, you always have to do this on change and value, which I don't think is as...
That's always how Angular was too. It's like a two-way binding.
Yeah, the ng model, exactly, with the two-way data binding. But you have to do it all manually here in React. So we can do the same thing here. Set calories. It's parsing the int there. And then value equals calories. So now it should default with the name. So let's read. Okay, if I refresh it here, I think I just saw it. Oh, I have pork chops. The estimated calories shows 0. Which we'll check in a second. There might be a bug there with that. I'm not sure why it's doing that, but we'll look in a second. So now, but when I click delete here, it still says pork chops, which I guess could be okay.
Yeah.
But if we wanted to delete it, we can do is, and I did this, I created a new function. I'll copy and paste it. It's called on deleting. And then it just sets everything back to 0. And then it calls that server action on delete. So instead of doing on delete here, we can do on deleting. So we'll delete this and we'll do on deleting. Okay. And if we did that right, let's see what it looks like. Just refreshing it. Okay, so these are all deleted. So if I'll put in here, I'll do food will be cereal, 300. If we submit it, now it's kind of set in stone. It's saved in our database. If we refresh it, refresh the page, it's still saved. Looks like the calories, there's a bug there. I need to fix that. But if I click delete entry, it deletes both of them. And now they're fine there.
Nice.
And same thing with lunch. So lunch will be like pizza, 400. And then delete entry works just if you refresh the page. It doesn't seem to work. All right, yeah, so that's pretty much my demo. I guess we could troubleshoot the bug.
I think that's actually like a really good stopping point because I feel like there's maybe some more Amplify-ish things, I'll call them, instead of Next.js things. Like, we'll get this repo out to you folks and get that updated just like we normally do out in codingcat.dev's GitHub space, and we'll show that. I am kind of curious when people think of like Gen 2 and how we've been like hot reloading and like creating things. Can we also show, do you have the console handy where we could like look at what this created out in AWS? And I
Yeah,
think
sure.
we could probably wrap it up after that.
Yeah. So what typically happens, we've kind of spent a lot of time on the app part of it, but the next part of this is like, let's say this is the app that we want to deploy. And we've been using this kind of ephemeral environment the whole time. And once we hit Control C here, it'll ask us, do we want to delete all the resources? Or we're not going to delete them right now. So I'll do no. So by the way, they're still there. I haven't deleted them. I can run npx amplify sandbox again, and it's just going to restart everything. But everything's still running in the cloud. It hasn't deleted anything. But the next step, if you want to do a deploy and like you want to get this up, is we have this new console experience. So what I'd have to do is I'd have to add this repo to GitHub. And then inside GitHub, I can then connect it up to our console experience and deploy it.
And I think like even right now you can show off your sandbox and like the actual files and stuff, right? The database, I should say.
Yeah, but we can also just look at what's in the ephemeral environment.
That's
So
true.
Yeah, let me, on my other screen here, let me see if I can bring that up.
Yeah, and while Eric's doing that, I will just reshare. I had my screens right here. There you go. So I'll just share mine a minute here. So everything that we covered here, just again, if you are out in Amplify, so let me remove the Gen 2. So if you come out to Amplify, docs.amplify.aws, currently Gen 2 is still in its preview state. So you can click the get started and it'll drive over to /Gen2, which has all of this information that we're talking about right now. We actually are working through the Next.js version of this on server components, and that's the app that Eric built out. So a lot of resources in here that you can dig through and check this whole thing out. So go ahead and go over there. I think Eric's ready for us.
Yeah, so here's the AWS console on my account. And then I can always go to, like, if I want to look at one of those resources, it created a Cognito resource. I can look at that Amplify configuration JSON file and get more details about it. But if I wanted to bring it up in the console, like I'll come here, I have some like sample ones. So if I just do created time, this one I created about 51 minutes ago. This is the one I just created. And here's all the data on it. And I'll delete it after this live stream. But here's the users that I created. And I can go in here in the console and check it out. If I want to do the same thing with AppSync, I can just go in the AppSync here.
And I think you can go all the way back to, if you do like Amplify, you can jump into the Amplify.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so
you can see all the different ones too.
Yeah, so I can come in here and try to find it if I know the key and everything. Or I can go into Amplify. I think it was in US East 1.
That's always a fun challenge, right?
Let's see here. This was...
I think we called it CodeCat something, maybe?
Yeah, it was CodeCat. Oh, you know what you have to do is, it doesn't show up here because we haven't added it to the console yet, but it's under Manage Sandboxes.
Yes.
If we go to Manage Sandboxes and left, these are the ephemeral environments that we have. And then I can look at, here's the CodeCat Live one that I deployed. And from here, I can actually delete it manually inside here if I wanted to.
I was thinking, and maybe this is just the old way, and Gen 2 is not like this. You can look at all the resources surrounding, but that's probably more on the command line now.
Well, yeah, so you can look at it in the command line, or really the way to do this is the ephemeral environment is just kind of meant to be deleted and used. And if you want to, you can look at it. You can try to search for the AppSync or Cognito. But what you really want to do is you click the try, this try Amplify Gen 2, and this will bring you to this screen here. And this is where you would want to connect it up. And once you do this, it'll create a production environment or development environment, whatever you want, based on the branches. So that's another big thing with Gen 2 is now you have branch-based deployments. So everything you do is based on the branch.
Cool.
So it has full stack branch deployments, and I'll show you here. So like, for example, you would click repository settings. You can add a new branch. You can do whatever you want there. We could try taking this app and deploying it, but
yeah, I'm thinking we're kind of up on time. So what I'll do is I'll grab this repo from Eric, and I'll actually host it under CodingCAD and host it up on Amplify too. And we'll add some screenshots and stuff to the actual post out on codingcad.dev, so you can access all the resources too. So I think that was great. I mean,
yeah,
we kicked that apps behind.
Yeah.
You did. I got to take a day off. This was such a pleasure.
No,
So,
thank you.
Any other last minute thoughts? Gen 2, where's it headed? Out of preview soon? Question mark?
Exactly. Yeah, we're really excited. Hopefully soon it'll be out of preview. So keep an eye out for that. We're adding in more these. You saw in the demo today, we had auth and data, but we're looking forward to like adding storage and functions and other things, more high level constructs to make it even more simpler. The console experience right now that you kind of briefly saw, that's where you connect up your GitHub repo. Right now, it doesn't. It has a lot of features, but it doesn't support all the features like custom domains. So we're like adding that very shortly, and that'll really superpower people. And be able to host your whole website and just have it every time you have a new branch to create your backend. So it'll be pretty powerful.
Love it. I can't wait for the full release. I'm excited.
Cool.
Awesome, Eric. Well, thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah. Thanks. Take care.
See ya.
Thanks, Alan.